I'm Dr. Rebecca McKay, Dean of the Division of Social Sciences and Education. Today we are located on the beautiful Talladega College campus, and we are in our newest building, which is the William R. Harvey Museum of Art. Today we have the honor of being surrounded by the beautiful paintings and the artwork rendered by one of our own professors, Hale Woodruff. The Hale Woodruff murals were titled Rising Up, and today we want to share with you how we are rising up and moving to the occasion of planning and using active learning in the Talladega College Education Department. We have been focusing on ethics for quite some time, and one of the things I would like to say, I have my colleagues here, and Dr. Rebecca Robinson will be talking about her lesson. Dr. Michelle Bridgewater will be speaking to her work that she did in her lesson, and Dr. Yolanda Clinton will also have time today and talk to us a little bit about the things that she did. So all of us have been working on planning and doing active learning, and we are delighted today to start this webinar by sharing a little bit about the lesson plan template that you have access to in the materials on our webpage. We are using a general lesson plan template that is based on the Educator-Teacher Portfolio Assessment System. It's pretty much a typical lesson plan. It's a little bit longer than our students sometimes would prefer, but we have found it to be extremely helpful to develop the academic language that our students will need when they do their portfolio and they write up the lessons that they conduct and videotape. In the lesson, we use a lot and spend a lot of time working with our students on the concept of standards-based lesson planning. And we also encourage our students, as we do in our own lesson plans, to really talk a lot about the central focus of the lesson. What is this lesson really about? Of course, we cover objectives, and we talk a lot about key vocabulary that we will be using in our lesson, and we put it in our lesson plan. The lesson considerations include the materials that the students are using. We really work a lot here at Talladega College on prior academic learning and the prerequisite skills. We do that in our college classrooms as well as in the classrooms of the schools where our teacher candidates do their field work. We also address the misconceptions that students might have about a topic, which is very interesting. Our students have really enjoyed working and finding out about misconceptions, which is developmental. In the lesson plan details, we use a before, during, and after introduction, and then we do a write-up of what will actually be happening during the lesson and how we will close that lesson. We also encourage our students at Talladega College to really think about, how can I extend this lesson? How can I make this lesson more interesting or more rigorous if time permits? And we also require our students to do a detailed bibliographic entry explaining where and how they secured their documents, and they are required to do handouts, anchor charts, and materials that they will be using. In the appendices section of the lesson plan, we go deep in different assessment strategies, and we talk a lot with our students and have them document evidence and the formative assessments that they will be using to see if their students are really learning. Of course, our assessments, we teach them to align with objectives, and we always ask them to provide evidence of the student understanding and how they will give students feedback. One of the things that has been so important to me in this lesson plan is that in all of the foundations courses here at Talladega College, we dwell and work on the personal and the cultural and community assets that our students bring. We do that in our own classes here at the college, and we encourage our students to build heavily on that. We also work with our students. They watch the lessons that we teach, and we try to embed active learning strategies, and we really model a lot of the Alabama Reading Initiative active learning strategies. We talk about plan supports. What will we do if there's a group of students who do not quite are not quite able to negotiate the lesson. And that's always an interesting bit of work. After the students teach the lessons, they often get it and have that aha moment. Oh, I thought everyone would get this lesson. And so that's really a powerful part of our lesson plan. Our lesson plan deals heavily in literacy work, even our content area lesson plans. We talk a lot about the essential literacy strategies that our students would need to be able to negotiate text, paintings, artwork, or whatever it is that we're asking them to utilize to teach the standards. We do a lot with reading and writing connections in our lesson plans, and utilizing the EdTPA lesson template and the EdTPA process has really increased the students' academic language. We talk about identifying a language function, what is your key learning task, and what are the actual language demands in this lesson. So it's very interesting to see how they have grown into this lesson plan and how we are growing with them. So I would like to share the lesson that I developed, and you will be able to enjoy that lesson. My lesson required the students to examine their moral principles and ethics that govern their choices of instructional materials, specifically children's literature. In my lesson, I had the students delve deeply into the four corners of the room. It was a very physical activity. In each corner, the students chose what resonated the most with them. I had Rudine Sims Bishop's biography and her literature on her feelings about children's books and the importance and significance. In one corner, we worked on Alfred Tatum and his theory on how to involve males in their textual lineage. Jacqueline Woodson was represented in one corner, and then Deneen Milner was in the other corner. So the students really chose what really resonated with them, and it was a very physical activity. They had charts that they made. Once they read and studied and discussed, there was a lot of conversation. They actually came back and reported out on their particular person that they had tapped into for their work in the four corners. So I really like Four Corners. I really started using it 4 or 5 years ago, and I think it has served me well, but I do believe that, you know, I'm growing into other active learning strategies, but I will continue to use Four Corners as one of the strategies that has served me so well.
I'm Dr. Robinson, and my lesson was on the Alabama Educator Code of Ethics. These students that I taught were students that had been introduced to the Code of Ethics in a prior class, but they were all in another level of our work here, and it was an ed psychology class. So they were introduced. So my task was to get them to apply ethics. So I used the strategy of Jigsaw. And Jigsaw was not something that was new to me. I have used Jigsaw in my college classes. I also used Jigsaw with a high school class and an upper elementary class prior to coming to the college work. And I like Jigsaw because it gives students a chance to move around, work in groups, but you have a purpose. You begin with a home or base group, and then from the home or base group, you go to expert groups. Then you come back and teach your home group what you learned in your expert group. So in my expert groups, I had 3 different modes of presentation. I used an article from the newspaper on some teachers and administrators who went to jail for telling answers on a test. Then I used a book chapter where students had to decide about retaining or promoting a student. Then I used a video, and the video was pretty powerful because it showed some text that a student had received from a female teacher, and the mom, of course, found the cell phone, so that was kind of very interesting to get the reaction there. But they talked about these different modes in their expert groups, and they had note-taking sheets. And I had not used note-taking sheets prior to this lesson, and I was very pleased with the way it turned out because the groups seemed to have more focus because they knew they had to write something down to be able to come back and share. When I've used Jigsaw before, they always knew they had something to share, but they tended not to share enough, or I, as the teacher, did not think they shared enough. But this time, it was like I couldn't get them to stop talking, to move on to finish the lesson. They were very much engaged. It could have been the topic, because I've not used Jigsaw with ethics before. But anyway, I thought it was very successful because they really gave me a lot of discussion back. Then they shared out to the whole group, one person, on each topic. At the end, I did a short exit ticket to get their opinion of the lesson and how they felt about ethics. So Jigsaw is my go-to strategy, and I recommend it and champion it every time I get a chance. So hopefully I have encouraged someone else to use it today.
Ethics is something that I work with all the time with my students, especially in their intro to special education course. And sometimes when you're talking about ethics, you're talking about legal issues, which all are basically the same to some degree. It can be a little boring to students. It's like, this is one more thing that I have to learn. So the challenge for me was in thinking about my students and thinking about myself, was to think about, okay, how can I get them involved? Well, there are ethics in just about every area that you could think of. For us in special education, our lead organization is the Council for Exceptional Children. So we decided to focus on the Council for Exceptional Children's Code of Ethics. Now, there are 12 codes of ethics that is promoted by the Council for Exceptional Children, or CEC. This is also significant because all of our textbooks are guided, I should say, through content that's put out by the Council for Exceptional Children. So it was a good mix for them to see what they're reading about and to hear what I'm talking about when it's all focused on the same organizing group, our key group. Now, the things that I'm going to discuss in a few minutes are all in my lesson plan. So, going back to ethics for a moment, as you can see, we all focused on ethics from a different standpoint. And as I stated, mine is from that of special education. Although there were 12 ethical principles put forth by CEC, I decided to focus on 5. Now, when we started the process of our presentation, we used a program called Lesson Up. And Lesson Up is an online engagement tool that we have started using here at the college. The students also use this online engagement apparatus, so to speak, or learning unit, to present some of their presentations. So when they're doing it, they're involving us. When we're doing it, we're involving them. So it's a good way to keep everyone engaged. So first we started out with the 12 principles. Each student read one of the 12 principles to the group. Then we focused on 5 principles, and they were able to understand that the 5 principles we talked about were those that we were going to focus on for the purpose of our presentation. So when we started out, we used Lesson Up to give them an opportunity to really go back and provide us with their prior knowledge of ethics. So as the students took a moment to think about ethics, they were able to gather their thoughts, and then they were able to take their electronic devices and type in their answers. or their responses to the question of what does ethics mean to you, which was also our inquiry question for the day. And the inquiry question was around the room to make sure that they didn't get off task as we were proceeding with other activities. Well, each student did put in what they felt about ethics, and it was shared to the group through the platform of Lesson Up. Once we did that, we went into our second engagement activity, since Lesson Up was our first. We used Fishbowl. Now, Fishbowl is really good if you have a group of students who really like each other. And I say that because sometimes familiarity does not get you what you're trying to obtain from students. Fishbowl gives the students an opportunity to select their group by reaching into the fishbowl, pulling out their number, and once everyone is finished, they know what group they're going to be participating with. So when that time comes, you have already established where each group will sit, and they get up and they go to their group. Now, for my purpose for this, we used different articles that really dealt with ethics in special education. And because I really wanted them to not only hear what we were talking about, I wanted them to feel something, because we all learn better when we have a feeling about something and we feel strongly about something. And that's what I wanted them to do. So the articles were somewhat provocative. And we started out with one that's titled, "Disabled Girl Suffered Horrific Sexual Abuse, Rape on the School Bus, and Sued Claims." This is not something that we always talk about in class, but it was shocking to them because this was real world. The second one talks about teachers' awful mistreatment of special needs students. This gave the students a chance to see that, okay, I'm majoring in special education, but even some special educators are not following ethics when they're working with students. Then we talked about lawsuits, which we talk about a lot anyway. And this particular lawsuit says, alleges abuse of special needs student in a certain school district. So this caught their eye. And as they began the process of reviewing the information, they were asked to use guided notes. And so using their guided notes, each individual student was supposed to read the article for their group and make their own set of guided notes. And once they finished making their own set of guided notes, then as a collective group, they were to come back and discuss the activity. And once they finished discussing the activity and determining how they were going to approach their presentation of this, they were able to determine how they were going to pass out or give out the information to the group, so we would all know what their thoughts were, and also which of the 5 principles we focused on they felt had been violated. So that is one of the things that we did. Now, Lesson Up is a wonderful tool that I recommend to anyone because it really gets students' attention, and the students also love using that. So for this particular lesson study, I used 3 active engagement activities. First, we used Lesson Up, which gave them an opportunity to type and be a part of the situation. Secondly, we used Fishbowl. And the thing that I like about Fishbowl is we didn't have to use all of it, but it obtained its purpose because it's about getting all students involved. By putting them in smaller groups, even the students who don't like to say anything or participate had no choice but to get involved and participate in the process. And last, we used guided notes, which we were able to obtain from them at the end of the presentation and use to see if they really were getting what we were getting the information the way we wanted them to be able to get it, and understanding it and being able to see how those 5 principles impact what we do every day. So that is what we did. I was very pleased with what we did. As a result, as any professor or any beginner, Lesson Up was my first time really getting into using it. And I really enjoyed using it, and the students enjoyed being able to give their response, see their responses on the screen, and hear it being read out to everyone. So it was a great way of sharing information. I was very pleased with the way that they performed. I was also very pleased with the fact that they were very active, followed directions, understood what we were doing, and really helped us to be successful in our presentation.
So good afternoon. My name is Yolanda Clinton, and I followed the three of my colleagues with Lesson Study 4. Lesson Study 4 focused on also the Alabama Educator Code of Ethics, and I've concentrated on 3 of the 8. Although the content of ethics was a driving force for my lesson, my main focus was actually to increase student engagement and use of technology. When focusing on the content, the central focus or the central question for my lesson was, what does it take to be a teacher who is ethically committed to a student or to students? We focused on standards 4, 7, and 8. When introducing the content, I also used Lesson Up. Dr. Bridgewater has given you a very, very detailed description of Lesson Up. Lesson Up is a very good platform to use when you are wanting to incite student engagement or invite student engagement. Lesson Up was used to introduce my lesson, and then as an instructional strategy where my students were able to actively participate throughout the delivery of the lesson. There are slides, and as I would talk about particular points or even show a video, my students were able to actively engage by inputting their answers or comments to whatever my question was, using their devices. Students were to log in. It's a web-based program, so they log in with a code. That's how they're actively able to input their responses. Now, my main focus, as I said, was engagement and technology, and that was taken care of by using Lesson Up. The other 2, I used 2 more active engagement strategies, one being Jigsaw, which Dr. Robinson explicitly described for you guys. The other being 1 minute write, and actually I did one more, an exit ticket. These 3 were not necessarily technology driven, so this enabled my students to be able to respond and for me to actually address every student's learning style. Okay? Now, the lesson study model is it was very beneficial for this because we were able to receive feedback from our team members even before we actually implemented the lesson. When we planned, although we didn't sit down and plan together, if either of us had a question or a concern, we were able to collaborate with our team members or our colleagues. After implementing the plan or during the lesson, another part of lesson study is a reflection. So we were able to reflect on the lesson that each of us taught, or well, let me talk, that I taught during this time. And the feedback was very, very good because it allowed our students, again, another opportunity to be engaged. Not only were they engaged, but they were actually using some very, very deep critical thinking skills because they were able to process what they had been taught during the lesson. What they did not understand, they knew how to address it or to get the answer from us. Not only did they provide reflections, but there was also a knowledgeable other and a participant observer who also provided very, very, very valuable reflections and information to help me, rewrite my lesson if I wanted to reteach it. So the collaboration there was very, very good. In my lesson, I use scenarios where students, after I use my instructional strategies, I use scenarios where students were to, that's when they got into their groups, and I used the jigsaw strategy. They were able to decide if the scenario was ethical or not, or the person in the scenario was ethical or not. And as all of my colleagues have said, the students were very, very involved, engaged, and they were like so excited, and they offered so much discussion, and not just surface discussion, but like really critical thinking discussion. And some things they were like, did that really happen? Or I can't believe an adult would do that. And these are 17, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old students that we are teaching, that I'm talking about. So it was very, very enlightening for them as well. In my closing, I will just say that the lesson study process has been a great tool for me as far as an educator, and also just the ability to meet, discuss, reflect, not just with my students and my lesson, but with the entire team. It is something that I think students will be able to utilize when they do officially become teachers. Education right now is very, very big on collaboration. So it just goes hand in hand. I enjoyed it. My students enjoyed it. And I feel like it is something that we will continue to utilize here, and our students will take with them, and they can put it in their toolbox of strategies when they do become teachers. Thank you.